a pear and ginger martini, hot cherry salsa, and grandma's cookbooks. This week, it's Capri Cafaro from the TV show America the Bountiful.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. This is where food and travel come together. Here at the Destination Eat Drink podcast and also on the Destination Eat Drink YouTube channel and at destinationeatdrink.com. This week, my guest is Capri Cafaro, creator and host of the PBS show America the Bountiful. But first, do me a favor. Share this podcast with your friends and family. Nothing gets the word out better than recommendations from your friends. And if you really like food and travel, you can support Destination Eat Drink with a contribution in any amount at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. Capri Cafaro is a TV personality, cookbook author, and radio host who got her start as a state senator in Ohio. Capri tells me about her Italian heritage and the influence of her grandmother on her love of food and how it led her to storytelling on TV. Then we talk about her new show on PBS, America the Bountiful, and some of the interesting people she met while filming the first season. Plus, great food, including interesting cranberry and cherry dishes, pear brandy, and hunting for a dinner in South Dakota. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Capri Cafaro from America the Bountiful. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
Capri Cafaro. It doesn't get much more Italian than that.
Well, my middle initial S stands for Silvestri, which is my mother's maiden name, so actually it does.
Okay, very good. Have you done any research? Do you know where your family comes from in Italy?
I actually and absolutely do. So it was I started it before COVID, but it came a bit of a COVID project, and I ultimately did end up getting my citizenship in Italy, and my sister's in the process of doing the same. It's the same. It's all the same information, but she has to go through the New York consulate, which is much more backed up than the Detroit consulate, which has jurisdiction over Ohio. But we are, I'm 3/4 Italian, 1/4 Ukrainian. My mother is 100% Italian. My great-grandparents came over from Calabria, Foggia, which is Puglia, and Campobasso, there's Molise, and Caserta, which is Campania.
Caserta, yeah. I lived in Providence, Rhode Island for many, many years, and you may or may not know there's a huge Italian-American population there. And
aware.
There's a great restaurant there called Caserta's, and so you just assume that they're from Calabria, but they make this, they make something called the Wimpy Skippy, which is kind of like their take on a calzone. So,
fun.
Yeah.
Providence, Rhode Island is a big Italian community, Portuguese as well, French
Yes.
as well. Rhode Island was a really interesting state. But yeah, my mission now, not that it would be a show of any kind, but my mission is to go to where my citizenship originates, which is with my great grandfather, Vincenzo Silvestri, who is from basically the arch of the foot of the boot of Italy, which is that part of Calabria.
Nice.
And so that's I've been to other parts of Italy, but I feel like the next time I go back, that's how I have to go. It's not particularly easy to get to. But that's my plan and my mission.
My girlfriend is, like you, has American and Italian dual citizenship. And one year we did that. We went to the town where her family came from. And, it is as desolate and nearly deserted as you would expect.
Yeah.
And you look around and you just go, I see why they left. There's not a lot here. they had to go and try and make a life in America. You mentioned that your mom was fully Italian. So
Yeah.
I'm going to run on a stereotype here, and I'm going to assume that she did the cooking in your house when you were growing up.
She did, but she's not my grandma. Growing up in the 80s, my mom was much more, sort of meat and potatoes.
Okay.
She definitely did the cooking in the house, that's for sure. My dad was doing none of that. But you are right to run with the stereotype that, I learned, how to cook from, my mom's entire, from my grandma, really. I mean, my sister and I both, and we carry those traditions on today, and it's very much a part of who we are. And I think like many Italians and Italian Americans, this goes for anyone, but certainly it's been my lived experience that food is a very important part of our identity, but also how we express our emotions, how we bring people together. And I think it certainly has informed my views on the importance of food in culture.
My girlfriend always talks about Grandma Ida and how she used to cook too. And did you have any favorite dishes from your grandma?
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, there's nothing that she couldn't make. The one thing that still intimidates me to this day that I have not made is her wedding soup. And if people are familiar with wedding soup, it's little mini meatballs and endive and escarole lettuce and little pustine pasta, and it's comfort in a bowl like much soup is. Chicken. But I feel like it took her like 3 days to do, making the stock, this and that, making all the little mini meatballs. She also made these like little croutons from hand as well, like handmade croutons that ended up being kind of squishy. It's the greatest thing ever. And I'm still, in my neck of the woods in northeastern Ohio, which is heavily Italian, you can get wedding soup like anywhere. And so, the question is always like, what's your favorite place to go get it? But it's the one thing I haven't made that's hers. But her lasagna is fantastic. Braciole, which if people are not familiar with, is beef pounded very thin and stuffed with herbs and cheese and rolled and tied with twine and marinated for hours and hours in tomato sauce. That was pretty incredible. Her lasagna, my sister and I make on special occasion, and obviously her sauce and meatballs for any time that we have more time to make the house smell like grandma's. I do most of the baking that she did, though. My sister does all the rest of the stuff. I do too, but I make the Italian bonbon cookies, which are known as wedding cookies in some circles, which are kind of little drop cookies that are almond flavored with a lemon glaze on them. I make the anise pizzelles. Bar cook. Clothespins, you name it. So I actually have a burn on my hand for my pizzelle iron or burn on my forearm actually to tell the tale. So
nice.
But that's my ballywick. She definitely left that, and I have all of her old cookbooks too. So like the old, McCall's and Betty Crocker from the 1950s and 60s, and all of our handwritten recipes. Now, the real like family stuff is not written down.
Of course,
the other stuff is things that she saw on on TV that she wrote down on a yellow legal pad with a date on it and stuff like that. I have all of that now, which is just amazing.
This is getting me thinking about Italian food. We go back to Rhode Island usually once a year to visit family and friends, and I'm definitely always make a trip to Federal Hill to get some good Italian food from there. So I got to imagine, Capri, that this is how you got interested in telling these food stories. That's what your show is about. It sounds like it's been ingrained in your brain since a very, very young age.
Absolutely. It definitely is part and parcel, again, of what has informed my views on food and culture and how food communicates with people. Interestingly enough, and it sometimes surprises people maybe that don't know me or maybe don't kind of know the region. But I and you may not know this, but I spent most of my adult life in public service, working I was an elected official for 10 years. Most of my background is actually in public policy and nonprofits. And then we have term limits at Ohio. So then after that, I went into TV and shifted from news to storytelling. That's my life in a 15-second nutshell. But I tell you this to say that when I was in office, part of what you do is, and one of the things I enjoyed the most is you go to all these fairs and festivals, in the region. And in northeastern Ohio, we have umpteen ethnic festivals. As you can imagine, we have at least 4 different Italian festivals and a stone's throw: Greek Fest, Croatian Fest, Pierogi Dash. But then we have wine country on the north coast of Lake Erie, believe it or not, which is an incredible draw. So we have the Geneva Grape Jamboree. We have all these very picturesque wineries. We have the 4th largest Amish settlement of the world. And then we have, all these different, agricultural festivals, not just your, typical county fair 4-H sort of thing, but, your pumpkin fest, your apple festival, your, all those type of things. And so, one thing two things resonated with me. One, these community events brought people together every year, regardless of their background, their economic status. No matter who you are or what you did, you're going to get, the specific cannolis that came out, or the pierogies, or the halushki, or, the kolache, whatever it was that you can only get once a year at these ethnic festivals. You're coming out to get it. And then you get, regaled with, music and dance and some of these other sort of cultural aspects. So it's educating people about other cultures, regardless of what your cultural background is. It's also, bringing an appreciation about agriculture, and what goes into, growing and making the food that people eat. And that's celebrated every year as well. And then, I think most importantly, in some ways, is that it tells this story. Why do we have all of these ethnic festivals in northeastern Ohio? Well, it's because the Italians, the Greeks, the Germans, the Ukrainians all came to this region to work in the steel mills and the coal mines. Why do certain things grow here? Why do grapes grow? Well, there's a certain, microclimate that comes in from the lake. To me, all of this experience said that food can tell the story of place in a way that almost nothing else can. And it's something that people can immediately connect to and relate to. And so I had this idea in the back of my head since 2013, and wasn't really sure how it was going to unfold and if and when I would do it. And, it sort of manifested itself in 2 ways. One, with America the Bountiful, which, is a show, now that is on public television nationwide. 95% of public television stations, every place but Hawaii, in the United States, will be airing in November, on PBS America in the United Kingdom, and available in all kinds of other ways online. But, it tells that story of place. We go to individual states. We tell the story of that state through a specific, food item, whether it's, beer and cheese in Wisconsin, which was our pilot, telling, why is Wisconsin known for beer and cheese? Well, because German and Swiss immigrants came there. And you're telling, that story, for example. And then I also have a podcast, which is a radio show on Sirius XM called Eat Your Heartland Out, which is about the intersection of food and culture, specifically in the Midwest, where I'm out there kind of being the Midwestern proselytizer, trying to, let people know that we are more than meat and potatoes, which is nothing wrong with meat and potatoes, but we have a whole lot. And so we do a lot of deeper dives on that show, and it's a much larger scale of, depth and breadth of different stuff, so everything from food insecurity to food waste to, food trail tours, breweries, and everything in between. So
it sounds so familiar to me, because when I started this podcast, it was initially, and this is going back now almost 7 years.
Oh, wow.
It was initially going to be just about, my idea was it's going to be about places that I've been and the food that I've had along the way. And I soon realized, I've been to a lot of places, but not enough to keep this going in perpetuity. And so I had to open it up. And as I did that, I realized there's all of these other things that are related to food and travel. And that was when I realized my new mantra, which I've been using on this podcast for many years, which is food is culture, culture is food. They're one and the same.
I love that.
And I've had other folks on, like Michaela Malazzi, who does Bare Feet on PBS. And
Bare Feet, yeah,
yeah,
she's fantastic.
She's great. She's actually been to Lisbon a couple of times, and we've done the podcast
awesome.
from here. But, she's like, yeah, food is culture, culture is food. Dance is culture, culture is dance as well. So I start to understand all of these things just from doing this podcast, which is what makes it so rewarding for me. But anyway,
absolutely.
Let's talk about your show, America the Bountiful. And I think you've done a good job of setting up what it's about and what people can expect. So let's talk about some of the different places that you've been in some of the episodes. I was particularly struck. I've watched several of them. You were nice enough to send them over to me because can't get PBS in Portugal. But I want to talk first about Oregon.
Yes.
And I did not know Oregon was such a huge producer of pears. So talk to me a little bit about...
And now you do.
Yeah, now I do. Now I know a lot about pears from your show. Tell me a little bit about pears in Oregon, if you could.
Absolutely. Well, I was, we're researching and trying to decide what the star of the individual episode is going to be. I immediately kind of went to pears for Oregon. I had done some research on it previously for my one and probably only cookbook I will do called United We Eat. And so through that, I found that Oregon state fruit is the pear, but it's not an indigenous fruit to Oregon. It actually traveled across the country from the Midwest, I believe on wagon train from I think Indiana, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a minute. And because of the climate there, again, with the winds and with the soil and the proximity to some of the water, the pears thrived. Fast forward from the 1800s to 2006. And the state legislature in Oregon made it the state pear, the pear, the state, fruit. And, there's a myriad varieties of pears. The Bosque, the Bartlett, they all, have their own, characteristics. Some are a little bit more red. Some are a little bit longer in shape. Some are a little bit, squatter, if that's like a technical term. But it was a beautiful, pears grow, all over Oregon, but the place that they really, sort of thrive in concentration is around the Hood River Valley, which I talk about in the episode as, being lovingly referred to as the Fruit Loop, because so many pears grow there. Interestingly enough, if anybody is familiar with Harry and David, the company that ships fruit, they're actually they're from Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And for good reason. Yeah. So, but usually on this show, we don't focus on big names. It's about, the real people, so to speak, that make that story of place. And so, I was really excited to have an opportunity to meet a gentleman named Gordy Sato, who is a Japanese American whose parents were in the Japanese internment camps in the 1940s. His father owned the pear orchard, put it in the care of his neighbors. The neighbors were good people, gave it back after Gordy's parents were released. And now, 75 years later, the sons, actually left a pretty successful career in marketing, and PR and retail. And, he runs the orchard in the Hood River Valley, which is, first of all, some of the most beautiful landscape you will ever see. And so that story is that story and the story of Black land ownership in Georgia with pecan growers are two of I think the more poignant stories of America the Bountiful, showing how, food informing the sense of place and culture can tell, and educate about both the best and the worst parts of American history. which is why this is, this is a PBS type of show and maybe not another network, because we are, I really steered into my nerd.
Right.
and so it is about food, but it's about a whole lot more.
And that's what makes it interesting. The stories are great. And you mentioned the beautiful landscape in Oregon, and I just want to go back to reinforce that. If folks watch the show, they will see that.
Yes.
How beautiful it is on there, on all the episodes, but in Oregon especially, how beautiful the vistas are from there. I did want to talk about, because for me, pears, it's like, okay, hand fruit, poached pears, pear tart, maybe on a salad with some gorgonzola cheese. Once you get past that, I don't really know a lot of things to do with pears, and that's on me. That's not on, it's not an indictment of pears themselves. So as I watch the show, I'm like, wow, they're so versatile, and especially as a drink. So let's talk a little bit about some of the drinks that you can have, and we'll start off with something called perry cider. What is that, and how much did you enjoy it?
Perry cider was great. So, I guess people are more familiar with apple cider, the fermented sort of hard ciders, but pear cider, the ones that are like fully only 100% pear, it's called perry. So you can't be perry without literally just only being pears. And I would say it's a little more mild and a little drier, at least to me, to my palate, than a traditional, apple cider type thing that you might have in a pint in England. Certainly the bottled stuff that you get in America, which is super sweet. This is not that. And so it was great to have some perry paired with, if I'm remembering, this is that's the other thing on just a side note here. One of the other things that I love to promote and advocate in the show is the role of agritourism, and how people who are, multi-generational farmers are finding new ways to bring people to their farm, educate, and that sort of thing. And so in that, I went to one of these farms kind of was open to the public, and got a chance to make a balsamic and pear pizza with gorgonzola, which was amazing, but very well paired with the perry.
Nice.
And there's more. Can I talk about the I think it was was that a pear martini?
Pear ginger martini. I wrote down.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. That looked amazing.
That was so good because I'm a huge fan of sweet and hot, and you'll see this in every episode that involves like sweet and hot. And we just filmed recently in Michigan where I had some hot cherry salsa, which had like jalapenos and like habaneros, and it was so every single time I get one of these flavor profiles, I freak out because I love it. This is one of those times. So Gordy had infused the vodka that he used with some peppers, and then, used pear juice, had some fresh pears, I think sprinkled some cayenne on the top. It was unbelievable. That's something I would have never thought of ever. And now that I know it exists, it's definitely something that I would, try, at a party or just for fun. Don't know if I could like order it at a bar, but maybe you could in Oregon. But that definitely turned me on to something different. That you could have this sweet and hot profile, and you could incorporate pears into a cocktail. The most interesting, again, visually, is this eau de vie, and this how they utilize pears in making brandy, but they also literally grow them into a bottle. Which was
fascinating process. Yeah. When I had my little hobby farm back in Rhode Island, I had a couple peach trees, and I always threatened to do that by putting the bottle over the blossom and growing the peach inside the bottle. And I never got around to it for whatever reason. And, and then we moved away. So I saw this on your show and I thought, oh, it's such a cool process. Can you talk a little bit about growing the fruit inside the bottle?
Well, here's one of these things that's kind of interesting, because when we were there, like, we actually didn't get a chance to see it on the tree. We had to like get some of the background on it. because like the harvest season for it had already ended. So I personally, well, it's in the show and we talked about it a little bit, didn't get to physically see it on the tree. But it was, but basically the way that I understand it is kind of just how you described it. They have to grow it into the tree and then harvest it. Grow it, like basically put the bottle on the tree and grow it and harvest it. And then the people that do the making of the brandy, then the eau de vie, what they do there is they basically take the fruits that are what they call the ugly fruit, the stuff that is maybe not pretty enough to put on the store shelves, and they make it into brandy in a way that is, informed by, a more traditional European process. And it was pretty good. I mean, I am not a huge brandy person. It was a little strong for me. All my friends ask, like, and even like family friends are like, how did you really feel about that? Did you like it? And I'm like, or you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like, actually, it was okay. The one and only episode that was really hard for me was oysters, because I'm not an oyster person, and having to eat a bunch of oysters was really hard. But the story was very important, so I took one for the team.
I wonder if that pear brandy would be good in some kind of a cocktail. I'll bet it would be.
Like an old fashioned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it wouldn't be quite such a strong profile on the brandy. It would take the edge off of that a little bit. I wonder. Maybe. Yep. We'll have to do that next time. Pears, there's also a variety of pears in this region of Portugal called the Rocha pear that's very popular. And I got to imagine some Portuguese family is making some kind of similar Perry cider or Perry brandy, or distilling pears or something. I'm going to have to start doing a little bit of snooping around, looking some basements and see what I can find here in here in Portugal.
There's got to be. I mean, it's like, I know the Calvados, which is like an apple brandy. I mean, these type of things I'm sure are happening, in places all over the world. I know that they use, I believe, plums in parts of Serbia.
Yes.
To make,
rakia.
Rakia, exactly. So, it's everybody has their thing, and that's what you get to learn through this process, which is I just feel so blessed and so lucky to have an opportunity to, kind of go behind the scenes, and then try to bring that behind the scenes to a wider audience. So people can really understand where the things they consume come from too.
Let's talk about some of your other episodes that you did. You did one in Massachusetts, and this one made me smile so much because last time we were in the States, we did a quick road trip from Rhode Island over to Cape Cod, and this is, cranberry country. And as we were coming back on the main road, all of a sudden it was like, bing, 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 bing off the windshield. I'm like, what is going on here? I realize there's a cranberry truck in front of us, and he didn't tie down the top. So there's cranberries just bouncing all over the road, boop, 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 everywhere. So I sped.
Well, that means they're good cranberries if they're bouncing.
They were bouncing.
They're actually hollow in the middle.
Seriously, they were bouncing 3 or 4 feet because they were coming up onto my windshield. So had to clean off the rental car a little bit before I returned it, but luckily there was no damage. Talk a little bit about cranberries in Massachusetts.
Well, first I will tell you, this is much how I was saying, like in Oregon, like sometimes like you get the B-roll, you try to fill in the blanks when like, Mother Nature does what it wants to do, right? Well, this is a very similar kind of thing when, you are working, and you're basically invading somebody's, farm. They got to work, even if like you're there invading their space, trying to do your work. So the day that we were on the cranberry bog, incredible family that has, a multi-generational co-op. They actually, supply Ocean Spray, which we did not mention Ocean Spray for, public television reasons. But incredible folks, but a pump broke. One of the men that really, that ran the farm had to go fix the pump. We were like working around all this stuff, not sure if stuff was going to come together the way that we needed it. We joined an active cranberry bog tour because they open up in the fall. They open up to the public. They do these cranberry dinners, but then you can tour the bog. You can get in the waders, of which I did, which was awesome. Of course, it was raining, which happens. I have been to 18 states now, 13 states in the first episode, in the first season. We've now filmed 5 as of right now in the second season. And I've been rained on in all 18 states. This one, it also involved, spiders and being called by my hotel telling me while I was in the cranberry bog that they were moving all of my stuff out of my room because they were oversold. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, it's going to be behind the front desk. I'm like, but I'm like not packed. They're like, don't worry about it. I'm like, what? And I couldn't find a hotel to like save my life. So here I am trying to like get it together. And I'm like, why is like Holiday Inn Express calling me? Like, did I burn the place down? Next thing. So anyway, the things you don't get to see on TV, that was not your question, but I always think those things are kind of fun to share. But it was the one thing that blew my mind, right, which I think most people do because we see the Ocean Spray commercials, is cranberries don't grow in water.
Right. They flood
cranberries
them.
don't grow in water.
Yeah, they
flood them. They grow in these vines that basically, rather than growing up, they grow across, if you will, like on the ground. And you'll see in the episode that I have this kind of rake thing. You dry harvest. It's the more traditional way to dry harvest, but you dry harvest there. And that's where that's really the method that you would use on a larger scale for the fresh cranberries you would get in a bag that you might ultimately use to turn into a cranberry relish, or cranberry jelly for, turkey at Thanksgiving, if you were to make one homemade. We actually do one of those recipes in that episode, from the mom, the matriarch of the family that has the cranberry bog. But then they flood them. The ones that you think about where people are in waders and, you see the cranberries floating around, those are the ones that are used for craisins, basically, for, dried cranberries, and cranberry and juices as well. And so it's a little bit different. And that the cranberries are good when they float. They have little air pockets in them. So I learned a ton. We also got to see one of these old cranberry sorters that basically is like this bounce test. It's almost like this cranberry plinko for those of you who watched The Price is Right as a kid. And if you've seen that episode, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
But it is, so the cranberries get feeded in and then they bounce around, and the ones, and then they kind of separate out the ones that maybe aren't as good or aren't as big, and it's fun to watch. But it was really quite fun. We had an opportunity, as well as we do in many episodes, to integrate an indigenous voice of the region, because cranberry is very important to, indigenous diet, something that is, cranberries are native to North America. So we had a woman show us how, she makes Johnny cakes, which are these, kind of cornmeal type cakes, and, along with a cranberry, like a cranberry relish she makes, and made this amazing turkey sandwich. And so, talked a little bit about the history of Johnny cakes and where that comes from, because that's also a kind of an interesting thing of the New England region as well. Of course, we also always love to have, a maker that uses the products in a different way. So we had an incredible woman who has a small business making cranberry jellies, jams, chutneys in her home and selling them all over the place. That stuff is incredible. I gave it to people for like Christmas gifts. Going through that process with her of how she makes it. Again, you learn so much at every step. But we often like to show, where and how is it grown? What is the historic context and significance of, what we're talking about, in this case, the cranberry? How is it being used now? And the importance of, those makers, small business owners, farmers that are bringing all this stuff together.
That's fascinating. You mentioned that you did a recipe for cranberries in the episode on Massachusetts, and it reminded me, you always do recipes.
Yep.
Tell me about maybe one or two of some of your favorite recipes or most memorable ones that you've done in the first season.
Oh, goodness. I will say that, one of the most memorable was pheasant marsala in South Dakota. I had no idea what pheasant was going to taste like. And so pheasant was the star of the show of South Dakota. They harvest pheasant. They have a big season in the fall every year. They have this long history of greeting people with pheasant sandwiches, which, are basically like almost like chicken salad sandwiches that dates back to World War II, which you would see and which is the reason why I chose pheasant for South Dakota, because that story about greeting World War II soldiers coming through on the train with these pheasant sandwiches and all the women that came together to do it. But so so I actually went out and I shot a pheasant, and I'm surprised I actually hit it. I can't believe it. There was no magic of TV in that one. It was just sheer luck. Okay. But I didn't know what pheasant was going to taste like. I was skeptical. I had no idea. And we worked with this incredible Chef David, who worked seasonally in South Dakota, and he made this Marsala, that was, I would say, probably like the fan favorite of everybody in the crew as well. It was incredibly tender and flavorful, and with the Marsala sauce and the mushrooms, and it just complemented everything so well. And it was tender, and he brined the pheasant for a long time, which I think is the key. Is like, you really have to know how to prepare it. And, he did all the back end work to make the pieces of pheasant that we had really, tender and flavorful. So, I mean, as usual, pheasant marsala and everything that I had in that episode, we went to a restaurant called The Pheasant. It's been around for like 70 years. And I had, they did an Asian chicken salad, like twist on pheasant, which was really neat too. So, that was definitely a memorable one. Favorites, Vermont maple, like the pudding chômeur, as well as the tarte au sucre. There's a big Quebecois influence there in Vermont. So we did 2 different types of desserts with maple, which were both incredible. I'm just a huge maple fan. I'm also a huge fan of Canada, so take that for what you will. Maybe that's the next stage of this is North America, the Bountiful, the Canada years.
Nice, I like it.
So I don't know, but I mean those are pretty memorable. You'll see in season 2, we did walleye was the star of the show from my home state of Ohio, and we did quote unquote walleye wings, which literally are like the fins, but made is like in like buffalo sauce.
Oh.
Instead, it was and the walleye cheeks, which are a bit like scallops. So I've never had, because that was a tough one. It was like, okay, it's fried walleye. Like, what else can you do? And so we had some really interesting takes on walleye in that.
So you mentioned season 2, and I remember you said something about going to Michigan for hot cherry salsa. I would just like to say,
yeah.
I have to imagine that you were up in the Lower Peninsula, the northwest corner up by Traverse City, because that's cherry growing. That's the cherry growing area. When I was little, my family, we lived in Michigan, and we would vacation up there every summer. Every summer we'd go up there. And one of the highlights was we would beg our parents, and they'd finally take us to this place called the Cherry Hut.
Yes.
Everything was cherry there. And the cherry pie was what we were begging for. But my mom would buy some cherry jam. They have cherry salsa. And there's also cherry wine up there, too.
Yep. We had a little bit of all of that. We unfortunately were not at the Cherry Hut, which is a great place too, but we were at an incredible place called Cherry Republic.
Oh, cool!
In Glen Arbor, which is unbelievable, and they're just such a great group of people, and they have a couple different locations, but we were at their sort of main campus, and they have a tasting room for they do different sodas as well as wine and beer, with cherries. They have even burgers, with cherries, and they do a cherry pie with cherry ice cream. They do. I mean, it's incredible. But that's where I had the cherry salsa. They also do this unbelievable grilled cheese with cherry fig jam, which I was all about.
Wow.
Well, we were at the National Cherry Festival, the 98th annual. There in Traverse City, which, is the self-proclaimed cherry capital of the world. Had an opportunity to also tour King Orchards, which again has been a multi-generational family farm, father, son. as well as another family who has been involved since the 1980s, who's still around, sort of now running the actual like growing and picking operation. In addition, they have like a farm store. They do, you pick stuff, which was really cool. It's a beautiful part of the country for people that are unaware of the Great Lakes. I kept posting pictures of like, this is the Midwest, people. This is the Midwest. I know people think of like flatland, which is also amazing too. I was just in Kansas filming, telling the story of wheat, which was really, really incredible. The Great Lakes, particularly up there, Sleepy Bear Dunes. I know
Yes.
Sleeping Bear Dunes, but I call it Sleepy Bear Dunes. Is like nothing that you would expect to be in Michigan. Let's put it that way.
My girlfriend is from Rhode Island, and when we first started dating, that was one place that I took her, was northern Michigan, of the lower peninsula. We also went into the upper peninsula, and that was her reaction. It was, I had no idea. She thought Lake Michigan, it's just a lake, right?
Right. No, it's an ocean, pretty much. Well, that's the thing about the show too, that I want to really try to like drive home is, I always felt that if we have all this in the backyard, my backyard here in Ohio, what else is out there? And I also felt that, people have no idea. One of the things we did in the Ohio episode is we went to the Ohio Islands. Yes. There are multiple islands in Lake Erie that are part of Ohio. And it was one of these things where I'm like, this is where we're going. Like walleye, we went to the walleye capital of the world, Port Clinton, which had its festival. But then we went to Kelly's Island and, we went out and we fished the walleye, and we went and we did this whole thing with the Department of Natural Resources where we filleted the fish and made these different fish things that I was telling you about. But to the earlier point, who knows that there are islands in Ohio? Well, maybe now that you do, maybe you'll get in your car and go. And that's what I also hope, that people will get to know their neighbors better through this show, and also see how much we have to celebrate and, really enjoy, right here in the United States. And, that people don't know, because we're focused on New York and LA and some of the natural beauties of the national parks, and all those things are incredible, but there is so much in between that deserves to be celebrated as well.
Absolutely. Well, Capri Cafaro from America the Bountiful, thanks for being on the show. We'll have a link. Folks can watch the show on PBS right now, but we'll have a link in the show notes so that they can go and find it as well. And I can't wait. You got me excited about season 2. So I'd love to have you back when season 2 airs so that we can talk about more of these great food stories around America.
Absolutely. I am looking forward to it. We barely started to air season 1, and I was already out on in the field filming season 2. I'm so proud of, being able to share these stories with a wider audience, and really excited to do so as well on your side of the pond. Now, at least, on PBS America in the UK starting in November. So, I think we're going to really introduce a European audience to parts of the United States that they're probably by and large unfamiliar with. So I'm excited about that as well.
That's Capri Cafaro, a woman on a mission if ever there was one. Season 1 of America the Bountiful is airing now on PBS and streaming on the PBS Passport app. You can also connect with Capri at capriscafaro.com, and there's a link in the show notes. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we're in Sicily and Rome and maybe, surprisingly, St. Louis and Turkey for pizza. Don't miss that. Until then, Destination Eat Drink is open for business. I just posted a complete foodie travel guide to Logrono, Spain, a small city with an amazing tapas culture. You can read that for free at destinationeatdrink.com/Logrono. That's Logrono. I also just posted a brand new video. It's about a city in Portugal on the Atlantic Ocean called Aveiro. It has beautiful boats on its canals and great food too. You can see that video by clicking on the video tab at destinationeatdrink.com or by going to my YouTube channel at Destination Eat Drink 946. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I will see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.